This is episode number 140 featuring artist Ken Salaz. And you're going to hear some things you've probably never heard before, like the anatomy of painting a waterfall, or how to make the sun glow in your paintings, and the tradition of seekers of beauty. Plus, how and why Ken became a non-criminal pickpocket and why it'll surprise you.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. I'm Eric, and it's my birthday. Na-na-na-na-na-na. Anyway, getting lots of wishes on social media. Thank you. It's always fun to be remembered. By the way, Facebook limits my personal account to 5,000. I don't have a business account because I want to keep it personal. So you can still follow what I do. You know, you can still get my feed by following me. It's just that we can't, I can't see yours, which is something I'd like to do. So once in a while when somebody drops out, I add somebody in, so maybe you can friend me. But in the meantime, follow me. You can also follow me on Instagram, Eric Rhoads. And that's spelled R-H-O-A-D-S, by the way. Eric, E-R-I-C. R-H-O-A-D-S. And of course, you'll see some pictures of the family and the kids and the dogs, but also a lot of art stuff I do. So one of the things you've probably been hearing a lot about lately is the Figurative Art Convention and Expo. It's kind of like the PleinAir Convention for people who want to learn or perfect the art of figure drawing, portrait painting, painting from life. And if you don't know by now, figure painting makes you a better PleinAir painter. At least that's what some of the masters like Ives Gamble say. We have a lot of fun. We bring in a lot of top experts. This year, Nikolai Blokhin, the great Russian master, is flying in from Russia, lives in St. Petersburg. And Michael John Angel, the great master, lives in Florence, Italy. He started the Angel Academy, taught some amazing painters. You probably know Cesar Santos. He taught him. And we've got an all-star lineup. Just added Carolyn Anderson. That's going to be big. Teresa Hawaka. Gabriel Gonzalez Delosa, Risha Perlmutter, Casey Baugh, Dan Thompson, Tony Sirenai, William Schneider, many more I should be mentioning. Anyway, check them out. It's coming up this November in Williamsburg, Virginia. We're going to actually do a PleinAir thing at the Figurative Art Convention. We're going to set up in the streets of Old Williamsburg. We're going to have models in the old costumes. It'd be worth it just to come for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, price goes up at the end of the month, so you want to get there before the price goes up. Get your seats. Visit figurativeartconvention.com. Of course, you should also visit pleinairconvention.com. In Denver in May, it's going to be the biggest ever, and we have way oversold our last convention, and so we're probably going to run out of seats. I don't know when, but probably pretty soon. Scott Christensen, Jill Carver, Kwang Ho, Daniel Sprick, watercolor superstar Thomas Schaller. And Tom Schaller and Scott Christensen are each doing pre-convention workshops. Those are going to sell out very fast. They got a faculty of over 80 in all. And the last ones have always sold out. You want to get there soon. Beat the fire marshal when he says no more, or she says no more. PleinAirConvention.com. Coming up after the interview, I'll be answering your art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. First, this is going to be a really interesting interview. Ken Salaz. Ken Salaz, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being on.
Ken, I'm really excited about this because I know a little bit about your history, and I think people are going to be fascinated when they hear some of your story. But also because you're just such a fabulous painter. And so we're going to get into all of that. How did this whole painting thing begin for you?
When I was a little boy, I used to draw all the time. Figures, And when I was 7, I had a really terrible earache. This was in St. Louis. And I stayed home from school, which I never did. I always went to school no matter what. But this was severe, so I was at home alone all day. And with hours ahead of me, so I started drawing. I spent probably 6 to 7 hours that day just drawing with this terrible earache. And it was something clicked in me. It just sort of came together, Eric, where I thought, wow, no matter what's happening in my life and, sickness and all sorts of stuff, this makes me happy. This makes me so joyous. And I was a little 7-year-old thinking, wow, can this make someone so happy? I'd love to do this all the time. So that, I think that was to your question, like a major turning point where I realized, God, the act of drawing and painting, because I did watercolor too, was a direction towards joy that was so accessible at any time, And then when I was 10, I did a watercolor with a bird in the sky during a sunset, and I handed it to my dad, and I said, "This is what I want to do, Dad." And, for my life. He said, "That's wonderful, wonderful." So those are the early, that's the early history.
So did you find that your parents were pretty encouraging about that decision?
Yeah. Yeah, they were very encouraging. I came from, we were pretty poor, to be pretty blunt. And my father was aspiring to be a doctor and go from one kind of living to another. And I saw him really just work so hard and just kept going. And he did. He's a doctor today. And what was interesting was he had said to me, "You don't have to be me. You don't have to do what I do." He said, "Follow what you love." And then I started loving drawing, and he was the first one to buy me an art table. He's like, "You love it? Here's Christmas." And he got me an art drawing table. Sorry. So he was always supportive, always. Even when I told him I'm going to college, I'm going to art school, he said, "Wonderful, great, go do it, follow it."
I think that's such a wonderful story, and it's interesting to me. I truly believe that you can change your circumstances in 1 minute with one decision. When you really think about it, I mean, it may take you a while to get to that decision, but your dad, you said you grew up poor. Your dad made a decision at some point in his life to change his circumstances, and poof, he decided to become a doctor. Now, I'm sure it was 8 or 10 or however many years of really difficult times.
Yeah.
But what a great story. And then to be so encouraging and to encourage you to follow your dream. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, well, on that point, Eric, about changing his circumstances, he always said growing up to me, and you could tell like he was applying it really to himself. He said that there's never excuses, son. There's never excuses. You follow what you love. You give it everything you have, and that's where you are. But don't give me excuses of why you didn't do it, or things are too hard. I don't need to hear that. I want to hear you tried everything, and you can't fail. Then you're going to go where you need to be. You can't fail. But don't give me excuses. It was as a young impressionable child. It was so inspiring, and it set up a certain psychology in me that, stuff. Life can be tough, but where am I going? What do I wish to do? What do I love? And there you go. That's what I'm going to be doing. So
you went to art college, or you went to art school for college. Where did you go, and what did you study?
I went to 2 places. I went to Carnegie Mellon. I got a scholarship the first year with ROTC. And then after the first year at Carnegie Mellon, which was a wonderful experience, I got accepted to Cooper Union in New York City, which was, everything free. So that I moved to New York City when I was 19 and finished school at Cooper. Which was a difficult school to go to, quite honestly, Eric. I was great. I was happy to get a free education, but it was severely lacking in teaching any techniques, any kind of anything, really, So it was difficult.
What year would that have been, Ken?
That was 1989. I got to Cooper Union.
This is a story that we've heard so many times, so many hundreds of times, of somebody who invested in going to a school, a college that teaches art, and then the art instruction was not sufficient. And most people don't know where to go or where to find it. And of course, at the time, even then, of course, at the time, there really were very, very few places you could go. And of course, there was no internet to speak of, and you couldn't even discover them. So how did you discover to move on to the next level?
Well, I at the time I was at Cooper, actually, the New York Academy of Art was starting to open up. And then I was debating to go to that school or not. But I didn't have money, even though I was working full time. Living in New York City was a little tough. And true to my dad's form, he said, "Make it on your own, kid." Which was wonderful in hindsight. And so I got an inkling. I said, "Wait a minute, the New York Academy, that's interesting. There's people that want to teach traditional drawing, and all that." And I actually crossed paths at that time with Jacob Collins, but then I didn't know he was a young Jacob Collins, and this was before he went to study with Ted Jacobs. So years later, I was a professional magician. I was painting in the evenings, and I was running a construction crew. I was a job foreman as well. I had a few jobs. And that's when the internet had come out, Eric, just like you said. And I type in, beautiful figure painting, and Jacob Collins paintings came up. And I thought, wow. And I called him on the phone, just on the job site. I was on the job site. I called him right then and there. I said, "Hi, Jake, my name's Ken. I'd love to study with you." He said, "Great. Come in and interview." And I said, "Well, I work full time." He says, "Then I can't have you. I don't want to take you as a student." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "If you're going to come study with me, you got to go all in. But otherwise it's not worth it." So I hung up the phone. I said, "Thank you," and 2 years later, I wrapped up my construction and everything, and I went and studied full time with Jacob at the Water Street, which had become the Grand Central Academy at that time on 42nd or 44th Street.
Right. Well, and that of course before had to have been life changing.
Oh my God, it was a dream come true. I mean, you walked into this atelier, and there's these cast drawings, end casts, and full figured sculptures and plaster of St. John the Baptist, and everything, and everyone's silent and drawing and concentrated, and it's like, whoa, did I just walk through the closet of Narnia? And it was like that, like walk through the wardrobe and boom, and there was Jacob and Travis Schlatt and Edward Minoff and Ken Salaz. My wife was teaching there, and it was like, this is a whole world. This is it, no going back. And I quit this is interesting, Eric. I quit my construction job I quit it, and it was right at the crash. I can't remember the exact date. It was 2007. It was a whole housing market crashed, and the economy was in trouble, and I quit. And it was like, part of me was saying, you're nuts. You're leaving a really good paying job to go paint all day and draw all day and do magic at night. You out of your mind. And I said, yeah, I'm out of my mind, but it's my life. I'm going to go be out of my mind and do my life. And, it paid off big time, Eric. It just paid off. It paid off. I could, I can tell you more about that, but I don't want to just keep rambling with it.
Well, I think that one of the things that somebody's probably curious about is, where did plein air painting come into all of this? Because going to study at Grand Central with Jacob was focusing mostly on the figure, and yet you have become one of the top landscape painters in America, if not the world. You're doing stunningly beautiful works. Where did that all come in?
Thank you. First, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Well, there I was. I've always drawn figures. I did some landscapes, and I've always done figure drawings and paintings. And 2 years in, I get after the first year, I get a separate scholarship from another school, New York. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I got a separate scholarship to go to France for a month and live with a French family and paint the landscape. I was okay. I've never really done too much landscapes. I mean, I've studied, but I went and did it and came back, and I told Jacob about it, and he said, you have to do the HRF then next year, the Hudson River Fellowship, which I did the following year. And that was essentially going up to the Catskill Mountains with, 20 other people, Jacob and, Edward Minoff and those included. And we would paint I'd meet Jake down at the coffee shop at 6 a.m., get in the car with him and whoever else was up at that time and drive up in the mountains and paint all day, paint landscapes all day long, and then come back, eat a quick dinner, and then go back out and paint sunsets. And, you do that for 3 weeks. It was a 3-week program every day. And it just awakened in me, Eric, the beauty of being in nature, recapturing beauty in the moment. And then at the end of the day, with all the sweat and all the bugs and all the wonderful, glorious sunshine and diving in the water to take a break, you dive in the water. All this fun stuff happens when you're doing plein air. Bears running right in front of you, sniffing, looking at you, deers. It was like wildness. And I thought, wow, not only do I love painting, but I love being out in nature. And because this whole experiences that go into the canvas. So I did that for 2 years, and then I went back every year as a fellow to help other younger students learn landscape plein air painting. And so that's where it caught fire. And my wife and I moved out of the city after graduating, and I told her, I said, that's it. I'm just landscapes. I'm going all the way and every day. And that's how it all caught fire. I still do portraits, I still do figures, but you can't tear me away from a landscape. It's just not going to happen. And to add a little more, Eric, there is something about plein air painting that is unique. There is something about the exchange between you and nature and light and atmosphere and smells that it is deep and meditative and spiritual. And it's profound. And the paintings I do, they are a second experience. They're like reminders to me, on my wall, or of moments of deep, profound existence. I look at the different paintings now. Oh, I remember that day.
What I find is fascinating is that you followed this track of learning the figure, studying the figure, because Jacob is all about the figure, I think, primarily. Mm-hmm. And
yes.
That's not easy work. And you devoted however many years in art school and then later on with Jacob to learn that. And then essentially with one change, click, all of a sudden you fell in love with plein air painting because you went to the fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that's fascinating.
Well, it's interesting because, Eric, as I was out painting, and I remember the big boulder I was painting out in the Catskills and the waterfall in front of me and all these trees. And as I was painting them, I thought that huge boulder, it was the size of 3 cars. I was painting it, I was like, that's a figure. That's somebody I'm looking at, Then the trees were somebody, and then the waterfall has its own character and its own figure. And I all the stuff I loved about figure painting, I could see in the landscape now. The character and the different characters on the stage of the landscape. Certain trees have certain, they're like the old crickety ones or the young, bold trees. They're characters. They're figures. Every waterfall has a different form. It has a different posture, and has a different way of laying across the landscape. And there's another figure. It's in motion and it's splendid. It has light flashing through it. But yeah, there's another figure. So that's how it's funny. It's, yes, all the figurative love went straight into the different meanings and what I saw, the different characters in the landscape.
Well,
They're all alive.
I think we tend to compartmentalize things. We tend to say, well, I'm a landscape painter, or I'm a figurative painter, or I'm a portrait painter, or I'm an architecture painter, or, and yet one informs the other.
Yes.
And,
yes.
I just did another recording a few minutes earlier, and I was talking about how Ives Gammell, I've been reading his book, and Ives Gammell talked about the importance of figure painting for plein air painters, or figure drawing for plein air painters, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's, well, it goes both directions, like you just said, or what Gammell said, by not painting the figure for a while and just painting the landscape, it allowed me to see differently. It allowed me to see differently and see light and form different. And then when I went back to doing a portrait or a figure painting that I do, it brings a how do I even put it? It brings a complete freshness, So the hips are like rolling hills. The shoulder is this lumbering log or this sprout, of an oak tree, if it's a certain figures, and so there's this overlapping of meanings and images when I paint the figure that's infused by the landscape painting, and like I said, vice versa. Am I making sense with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's I mean, hair. What? If you've painted waterfalls, you're going to love to paint hair.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, for me, they're both faceted. They're both very similar. They're different, but they're similar.
Waterfalls. I'll just take this moment. Waterfalls look easy, but they're not easy. What is the key to painting a waterfall?
There's a few keys from how I approach it. Layers, meaning you don't try to nail it on the first shot. Right? That's important, because the structure of a waterfall is a layered structure. If you look at it, you mean I'm gonna digress a little bit, but not too much if it's okay. We all know that the figure has anatomy, right? Well, every object in nature has its own anatomy. So the waterfall has an anatomy. It has a structure to it. And the thing about a waterfall's anatomy is that it's layered. So you have a large portion that's the hard, let's say the strong water that's coming down. That's the center form. And then you have the sprays that are spraying out. And then you have the mist that's bellowing up. So if I try to capture that all with one shot, my experience is it gets all muddy. And muddy not in color, but it gets confused. But if I focus first on the first part of the structure, the inner flow, and then on top of the inner flow, I catch the spray, and then after the spray, I catch the misty bellows. By approaching it in stages like that, it simplifies it and lets me know where I am on each stage of the waterfall.
So let's use an analogy on that, just because I'm curious about that. Mm-hmm. The analogy would be, if you're drawing a figure, you're drawing the shape of the skeleton first, and then you're laying the muscles in, and then you're laying the skin in, etc. That would be similar.
Well, that's one way to look at it. I would go to a slightly different way.
Okay.
It's more like blocking in the torso.
Okay.
And the tilt and all the proportions of the torso. And then then blocking in the center portion of the major shapes of the leg masses and the arm masses and the head. So that's like the core. And then the second pass of refinement on the figure, which you would do is then reshaping that basic block in to give you the shape of the deltoid, the shoulders, the belly. There's the second pass is you're starting to go to the exterior sprays, the exterior vistats and the others, and then the last flume and all that is where in figure is the hair, the subtle gesture of one finger moving one direction or the other, So I see it more like that rather than the bones
That makes
outward.
sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you, how much plein air painting do you do? Because I know you do a lot of studio painting.
Yeah. Time of year, depending on time of year. In the summer, 2 to 3 days a week I'm out. And then the fall, probably about 2 days a week. But summer, I have to dial that back. Summer, sometimes I take 5 or 6 days, and that's all I do. Or I'll just, last year I just flew off to Portugal for 6 days and I just painted straight 6 days. So on average, it's, let's say 3 times a week in the summer with these blocks of 5 days straight, interspersed into there. And then in the fall, I'll do 2 days a week, and then those blocks also, like a 4-day plein air block. Then in the winter, Eric, I'm inside. I take all the plein air studies, I put them up, I look at them all, and I say, "Ooh, this one's calling out." Then I do the studios from there. So that's the form of it.
So when you're doing,
and Eric, I count. Sorry to interrupt, but I count. Hey, I'm running. I have 2 kids. I'm taking them to the swimming pool, this, that, and the other. I drop them off. I look at the sky. I'm like, that's awesome. I run to my studio. I get my stuff. I go out, and it's 2 hours. But that's important. That drop everything for a moment, go get out and paint because something is amazing. I'll do it, and that means a lot.
Yeah, you got to be ready. You I assume you keep a kit handy so you can just grab and go. You don't have to put everything together.
No, it's sitting right there, right next to the door. Yeah. It's right over by the door.
I have found that once in a while I'll steal a tube of paint out of my kit, for my studio, and then I'll get out there and I'll go, wait, I don't have any white. So now it's like got to have a separate kit. So when you're doing the studio work, you're doing a lot of glazing and layering. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot of layering and some glazing towards the end. Yes. So the studio pieces are you get it to different timing with it. The plein air, you're out there. You've got the light's going to change every 2 hours to 3 hours. It changes every moment, but you know what I mean. In the studio, you have a controlled lighting, and you have your studies, and so you can take your time and breathe through a painting. So I can do an entire grisaille or an entire simplified 3-color underpainting. The sky, and let it breathe, and then on top of that, start layering different, the clouds with scumbling and glazing and impasto, and then I scrape out areas. And I also, with the layers, include different, ways of applying the paint. Because I found in the beginning when I was doing figurative work, I used, 2 or 3 brushes of the same kind. And when I went to plein air, I wasn't getting enough variety of textures that nature demands. So, I sometimes paint with sponges. Sponges. What else do I have around my studio here? Yeah, old brushes, old painting brushes, feathers. What else we got here? Oh, there's a plastic bag I crumpled up and put into some paint and splashed on the painting there, just to give it under texture underneath everything. That on top I'll build and refine to look like a mountainside or a rock or whatever.
So for the benefit of some of the newbies who might be listening and they're hearing some terminology that they're going, what the heck is he talking about? Talk to me about grisaille. Talk to me about, what was the other one you used?
Scumbling.
And
scumbling.
There was something else, but let's start
there. Glazing. Yeah, there's grisaille, scumbling, glazing, impasto. Yeah. And then there's what do you find in the kitchen sink to apply? But let's talk about the more traditional. Scumbling is, by the way, there was a huge argument over this with Jacob and other artists about what was glazing and what was scumbling. It was like, it almost went to fisticuffs, let me tell you. So scumbling is where you're not using medium. You're not using any kind of medium. and you're applying the paint by almost drawing it on the surface. And it's a thinner layer than if you were to pick up a huge glob of paint and put it on the surface solid. Scumbling allows some of the underpainting to come through. All right, so it's kind of like pastel. It feels like pastel when I scumble. That's that.
Why
glazing,
scumble?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose?
Why scumble? All right. So can I tell you what glazing is, and then I'll tell you why I use scumbling as well?
Yep.
Glazing, you're using a medium, right? And you're mixing in a whole host of mediums, whatever you want, and then you're wiping it across an area, and you can let that sit, or you can wipe it off to make it not such a deep glaze. And it's more like a huge wash over an area.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there because, again, I don't want to confuse everybody. So when you're talking about using a medium, you're talking about dipping some transparent paint into a medium like an thin oil-based medium, a mixture of maybe it's Damar varnish and linseed oil and maybe some dryer or something like that. Everybody has their own mediums,
right.
But the idea is that you're putting a thin layer of color, transparent color, into that oil, and then you're laying that on top. Is that correct?
Yes, that's it. That's it. Sorry if I would.
No. I hear from people and they go, "What the heck was he talking about?" And I like to make sure that a lot of people listening already know these things, but for the people who don't, I think they'd appreciate the explanations.
Right. Okay. Good. So and there's certain colors that are more glazing, tend more towards glazing than others. They're more transparent. So the transparent colors like Indian yellow. It's easy to glaze because it's a transparent color that when you add the, liquid, you mix it or with a stand oil or whatever you're using, linseed oil, it goes across the surface transparent and it flows transparently, and that's its nature. So yes, that's more of a glazing. It's hard to glaze with burnt umber. It's not a good glazing. So in glazing, you have to really select what paint you're using to glaze. Now, why do I scumble? I find myself I have more control with scumbling because I can do it in a certain area. So a rough analogy is like glazing is like if you were to pour Kool-Aid on your painting on it would sling flat. You pour Kool-Aid, and the red Kool-Aid goes over everything, and then you wipe it off, or don't. Whereas scumbling is, I take the paint on the brush, and I could do just a certain area, and get a light effect, like the sun, brightly wrapping around a tree, or shooting across the sky. So the paintings that I have that have those long, gradated sun rays going far from one side to the other, I can't glaze those. There's not enough control in the glazing. I scumble those very often, most of the time.
So the effect is that when you scumble and then you've let that dry, and then you put a glaze over it, it's transparent, the glaze, and so you're seeing the effect of the scumbling, the variation in color or underpainting showing through. You're getting some more depth by doing that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Eric. And this is so when you use them both, I'm glad you brought this up. So let's say I have a sun that's bright and it's blasting. So I'll scumble from closest to the sun, a lighter value, and then as I get further, I'll actually switch to a darker value in the scumbling, and I'll scumble a darker value, and then switch to a darker value all the way away from the sun. So I got this value gradation set up, very controlled with the scumbling. Now, let's say I was using white to make that gradation, white and yellow, let's say some yellow, cadmium yellow. After you do that, if you just do that and leave it, it's fine. But white scumbling can leave the painting a little pasty looking and non-colorful. So now that I graded the value with scumbling, and I pass over with a glaze of another color, boom, now the colors, the chroma of the color's high, the value's set, and you get a whole nother effect, and you get these layers.
Well, and therein
does that make
lies
sense?
therein lies the problem with whites is that, often we get these chalky paintings.
Yes.
So the glazing over the chalky, the glazing kind of gets that richness of color back in there, but allowed you to get the values proper, and then you don't have that chalky feeling.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to I don't want to stay on this too long because I don't want to bore everybody completely to tears, but I think the idea of, okay, you talked about impasto. Quickly, what's impasto?
Impasto is adding something into the paint that thickens it, and it looks like this. It goes from being smooth and fluid to like a stucco wall you'd see on, someplace, or a plaster wall. The paint gets thickened, and that allows for it to be applied in a thicker manner, which gives texture, and it raises the paint off the surface.
And what do you use to give that texture?
I use oleopasto.
Okay.
Yeah, I use oleopasto with Winsor Newton has an oleopasto, and Rublev has they call it impasto medium.
Right.
Rublev brand. Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay. So
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it dries faster. The impasto. Yeah, it helps. It dries faster when you add in. So when I'm doing nowadays, Eric, often when I'm doing plein air, I'm out there plein air, and I got to get these rocks and these boulders in. I'll get the impasto, the oleopasto out, and I'll mix it into my color on my palette, and then I'll paint them, and then in 2 hours it'll be dry. And I can now go over it with other details, or I can glaze over it if I want. People often ask me with my plein air paintings. They say, "Wait a minute, how'd you get all that done?" How, my students are always saying, how come it's just not getting mushy? And it has to do with using the right mediums. And impasto is a big important one when I'm plein air, because I can get it down, it'll dry, and I go over quickly later.
So you're actually doing some glazing when you're doing plein air work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I know it's not archival.
Are your plein air sessions typically longer?
Yes, they are. They are. And that comes out of the habit of painting, at the Hudson River Fellowship with Jacob is, we'd sit there for an entire 6 hours and paint one scene, and then come back the next day and do the same scene again and really take it. And when I first started doing it like that, Eric, I was very impatient. I was like, oh God, I want to get like 5 paintings done this week. And I was so impatient. But then as I got better, it became my style, where I will go to the same location at least twice. And so I'll paint from 8 a.m. to 12, and then I'll go get lunch, and then I'll do an afternoon color study, and then I'll do an afternoon painting from 3, or let's say 5 to 8, or 4 to 8. So any day I'm going to do 2 paintings, and then the next day I'll do those same 2 because they've dried.
Right.
And so in the end, I've got 2 paintings, and I've got 2 or 3 color studies I do.
Well, and I think the magic about the fellowship is that it's teaching very much like Thomas Cole or Frederick Church or one of the Hudson River School painters would have approached painting in the field.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more patience, a lot more sense of detail, and so on. From what I can tell, the painters in the fellowship, who it seems like everybody that comes out of the fellowship is just a rock star painter after they've spent those 3 weeks. And but you'll see the kind of detail, you'll see the leaves on the trees rendered pretty carefully versus, very much like you would have seen in a Hudson River School painting, versus a lot of us who might just be kind of sending the, kind of a looser impressionistic feel of those leaves. Would that be accurate?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. And honestly, Eric, I like to do both. Because there's something beautiful in both, and you learn how to see nature differently in both ways. So what I'll do nowadays, because I'm always changing, I'll do the slow process of the painting, like of the scene, and at some point I'll just take that off the off my box, my open end box, put up a fresh new panel, and just do really a loose overall block and color shape, light, color shape, light, color shape, light, and then put that down, and then put my original back up, and that will inform my original painting. You see, it's because one difficult side of being so slow and methodical, or not tedious, that's the wrong word, slow and methodical and patient, is you do have impulses. Like I sometimes I want to jump out of my skin when I'm out there playing. It's so exciting, Eric, and here I am like going really slow on this tree limb, and so I have to put the slow painting down and get something else up there and just dance my way through it, and just blast it out and just woo, have fun, like jump in the river of the painting, put that back down, and then go back to the original. And I hope my analogies make sense.
Well, I think that's an interesting approach, because if that were me, I'd probably start out, being patient, then I'd get impatient, then I'd ruin what I've done because I decided to get bored and go wild, and then I'd probably screw everything up. So having that extra panel, I think it's a great idea. Then you can kind of try both things.
Yeah, I've done that. That's the difficulty. I've messed paintings up because I got impatient, and not that it was anything. Wrong, for the impatience. We're human beings. We have a mind, heart, body, and soul, and we're sitting there painting. We can't expect it. All of our sides have to be engaged, and sometimes the body and the heart want to make you just get into it faster or more looser. Yeah. And so bringing an extra panel, I just take and let that express itself.
What's also nice about that, Ken, is that, we tend to put ourselves in boxes as the type of painter that we are. And I don't know about you, but I get bored. I like to try different things. And so, you go into my studio and you'll see very tight things and you'll see very loose things. You'll see some abstract stuff. You'll see, you see a lot of variety, just because, sometimes I just don't feel like doing one of them. And I think that we need to give ourselves permission to try some different things.
Absolutely.
Now, you just had a show. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, it all feeds the understanding and love of painting, which is why we're doing it.
Yeah.
It feeds the love for it. So, yeah.
I visited a show at Ray's Gallery that you had, and I thought it was really an interesting show because it was made up of a lot of your paintings, including the original that you made in the video that you did with us on what was it called, Light and Sunsets or something, and
that Majestic Landscape was the name of the painting.
Oh, yeah.
The video was. Yeah,
you would think I would know that.
Landscapes. Yeah.
But you had when I walked into the gallery this summer and spent some time with Howard Rays, and I looked at those paintings. They held up. They would have held up against Cole or Church or any of those great painters from the past. They just held up beautifully, and they glow just gorgeously. And yet you also included some other painters in that show. Tell me about your philosophy on that and why you did that.
I feel it's important to promote the idea and the act of painting and fine arts and plein air painting across the boards. I think it's too easy as an artist to shrink oneself into me and my career. And if you don't take a step back and say, wait a minute, I'm standing in a long tradition of seekers of beauty, a long tradition of seekers of harmony, as expressed on canvas. I'm in a tradition. And anything I can do to help the tradition invigorate this culture, this world, this country, this city, is upon me. And so that's so when I had the show, Howard says, all right, you want a show? You have a big solo show? And I said, yeah, I want the big solo show. He said, okay, bring me 20 paintings. And I said, Howard, but I want other artists there as well. And he said, well, I've never heard this. What do you mean? And I said, well, I can do all the paintings, Howard. I can do them. And I did. I said, but wouldn't it be great for people to walk in, see all my paintings, and then also see, wait a minute, there's a movement. There's other painters out there painting with this direction, with this enthusiasm. And there's not just one. There's, oh, look at this guy. And I hope that maybe they would see another artist's work and then look them up and start, really expanding their understanding of what is happening in the United States today, Eric. There is a change happening. There's a cultural change that I feel that, we are responsible for. Yourself, Eric, with all your promotion of the PleinAir and being out there, everything you've done affects our culture and our time for the better, I feel. And I feel that I have a responsibility to do that also. And the more the public is aware that there are people out there in mass seeking beauty, seeking to paint it and loving it, I think it raises the heart of our country. That's the wrong answer.
I'm glad to hear you say that, and thank you for the compliment. I think that's the right kind of attitude, is that we need to lift one another up and we need to expose people to these things. I think that people have become intimidated by art because there's parts of art, and I'm not trying to be critical of those parts of art, but there are parts of art that clearly some of us just don't understand or don't get. And we're oftentimes made to feel foolish because we just don't understand why that painting is a good painting. And yet, and I think that there's this assumption that things that they know, that they can understand, that they, things that are representational realism, I think there's an assumption that nobody does that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right. There is an assumption that it's gone, that's what they used to do. That was what art used to be, and it's not. It's, I went to Cooper Union, and what you just described was the difficulty of going to school there, it was a conceptual school, conceptual art, and that's what we were taught to do, and which I did, and I did assemblages like Robert Rauschenberg, and I had a great time on that level, but I missed the craft and technique of representing something that I thought was just gorgeous and beyond words and fleeting, in paint. And so I think people, you go to the Guggenheim or you go to the MoMA, whatever, and I think a lot of the things they see is like, well, okay, it's in the museum. I guess I should like it, and. Well, I don't feel that needs to be the bulk work of what people's art experience is today. It needs to be like, you see a work, it blows you over. And you get it in parts of your soul that you don't even understand, but man, it touches you. That's artwork. That is art. That's the art that I think it can play a role in the world today. It's not, I don't get art. It's like, man, I got it. Boom, it hit me. I loved it. You should have seen this painting of this one little tree. It is amazing.
Well, people accuse us of repeating what's been done or repeating the past, and yet I think what's happening is the painters today are so good that we're building on the techniques of the past and getting better at those techniques. So you look at just use Jacob as an example. Jacob's techniques and the techniques of people like, Daniel Graves or Michael John Angel mm-hmm. or Charles Cecil, or many of the other of that group that kind of started this resurgence of this movement. You look at those people and what they're doing, they're building on the past. They're not repeating the past. They took the techniques of the past. Now they're making them better, they're making them stronger, and the paintings, some of the paintings that are being done today, both in landscape and in figurative and portrait work, are every bit as good or better than some of the great masters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people would say that's a sacrilege, but there are definitely painters you and I both know who are doing work that blow away some of the masters of the past.
Yes, I would agree with you. We have the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of giants, and they are giants. That's not taking away. They're giants, but we have the opportunity now to learn from them and stand on their shoulders.
Right.
There's no sacrilege in that. It's like we wouldn't be here today without everything they did. I mean, and some of the paintings of the old, church or Shishkin will always be of the greatest quality ever, because the paintings are off the charts. But we have our own voice in our own time, and we might be using a similar language, but we have our own poetry to say. So people that have the argument, oh, you're just doing what was done before, it's like saying, oh, you can't use English because Shakespeare already wrote the plays.
Right.
No, I can use something called English, and I can write a 5-act or 3-act play, and it'll be a new voice. Don't tell me the form is old and done. No, the form exists to express a new poetry. That's what we're doing. So that's my response to that. Oh, you're just painting in back? No, actually, we're using a language that allows us to express the voice of today.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And as a matter of fact, I couldn't have said it. That was fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
One thing I think it'd be fun to touch on just briefly, because I found it to be a fascinating story, is tell us about how you kind of, you ended up in Europe and you kind of made your way, how you made your living and how you survived, because I think that was a neat story.
Yeah, well, in a funny way, Eric, it was going back to the roots, because I told you, my family, my father's side was in Arizona. They lived some of them on the reservation, some of them right next to the reservation, and they're my father's side Yaqui Indian or Native American, and it was an interesting place to grow up, to say nonetheless. But it was an adventure. I would put it that way. It was an adventure as a kid being around that environment. So when I got older and graduated from college and all that, I traveled through Europe, and I wanted to break away from anything I had to do, I was supposed to do, and just live in from one vantage point, Eric, to live in the underbelly of life, quite honestly. And having studied magic and mentalism, already growing up and in college, I went and I befriended, pickpockets. I befriended them because they tried to steal my money. What do you call it? Hustlers, con artists, all sorts of people. Because I was I grew up doing magic as well, and I wanted to learn how to not make magic something you do on a stage and like, okay, here's my tiger. Ooh, it's gone. Here it is over here. But more like in the interaction with people, this magic happens, in the exchange between myself and others. And I felt that the pickpockets and these con artists, these hustlers that were trying to, misgive change to people and all sorts of stuff, I thought, well, that's really interesting, because in a way they're doing magic for nefarious reasons, but it's all within the interactions they're having with people. And so that's why I studied with them. I learned to steal watches. I learned to lift wallets. And for me, there were these gypsies that taught me. I did have a rule. I had a rule with them that I would teach them some magic tricks, because they loved the card tricks, and they would teach me the techniques that they were doing to steal. And I told them, I said, I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna turn it into a magic trick. I'm gonna give the wallet back. I'm gonna give the watch back. And they kind of argued with me, because they thought, well, we can get a good price for it. But I said, no, you want to learn the card tricks, I'll teach them, but you got to let me give it back. So I would literally go talk to people in Rome and have a coffee, talk and laugh and do this, and I would take their watches. I was doing it, and then I'd say, oh, by the way, here's your watch, and and they'd be like, what? Hey, what are you doing? And I was like, no, I'm a magician. I'm practicing. And they'd laugh, and we'd have a good old time, And I said, but you see those guys over there? They're not practicing. They're for real over there. So that's what I did.
Well, and when you came into the studio to film your video, you had my watch off before I knew it, had my wallet before I knew it. And you also did, I won't reveal what it was because I think it's worth seeing, but you did a mentalism trick with me on camera that not only blew me away, but the crew at the video studio, they were all like, how did that And then you also did that on stage at the Plein Air Convention a few years ago. So, and you're going to be on stage at the Plein Air Convention this year. Will you, aside from giving us some great tips in painting, will you maybe do a little tiny bit of magic?
I will absolutely do some magic for the whole crowd there. I already have a few things in my mind that I'd like to do. Time allotting. I'd love to do it because nothing brings people up like magic and the wonderment of it.
You were on some national TV show, weren't you? Doing magic?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was on the Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. I've been on NBC. I've been on CBS. The early show, Good Morning America. I can't remember the name of it. You can see on the website, Astonishment Inc., the website I have. You can see the reels of me on national television, which is fun. Stealing the watch off the Roots. The band off Jimmy Fallon. That was funny. Reading Jimmy Fallon's mind. Which was a crazy place to go into, his mind. I made it out alive. And it's from one vantage point, it's like, oh my God, you were on stage with Jimmy Fallon and national TV, and from another vantage point, Eric, it goes back to the roots I was telling you about. To relate to Jimmy like I would relate to the guy who was stealing the watch off in Rome, or back in Arizona, it's about the exchange between one human being and another, and what magic can happen there. It was very down home for me to do that show. Interestingly enough.
Well, now we have to figure out how to leverage your magic career and the national visibility you get to exposing people to representational painting. So you'll have to think about that one for a while. I'll be thinking about it, definitely. So, Ken, just briefly, because I want to touch on this, you did this incredible sunset painting, and I don't think I've ever seen the sunset glow like you made it glow in that painting when you did that video. Touch briefly on how to make the sun really glow, how to make it stand out, and then just tell us briefly about that video.
Okay, the key to making a sun glow is a control and understanding of the gradation of your values throughout the painting. So at every leaf, every rock form, every part of the water and sky have to be in value relationship of the sun itself. And it's a real controlled and subtle gradation from that one source of light. That's one aspect, the value. The second is the control of the color, and to know when to get more chromatic and then when to drop the chroma, because that'll cause a glow as well. And then the third aspect, Eric, and when we paint together next time, Eric, we'll do it. I'll show you. I'll tell you what I mean. We'll do it right there. And it's in the video. It's right there in the video because I talked through it for, was it 10 hours? I can't remember how many hours it is. The third aspect is how the light is hitting each object along the way. It's not just the sky that causes the glow, it's the light washing over, how it washes over water, how it washes over trees, and how it washes over rocks. So the rocks, how you represent light on the rocks tells the viewer that sun is glowing hot. So that's so it's everything in relation to that source of light. That's the quick answer. Those three aspects. The video itself thank you for having me come and do that, Eric. I really appreciate it. It was a wonderful experience. Your whole crew there is amazing. They're so much fun. And the video itself, I was really happy because I could slowly walk through the different stages of the paintings I do. And, people see a painting that glows that I've painted, and I go, how'd you do it? And I'm like, oh my God, I have to take you 15 hours ago when the painting was in this stage. There's certain secret things I was doing. But in the video, you get to see it transform right in front of you, this nice slow process, and see my palette and how the palette becomes painting, how the colors become clouds in the sky with light hitting them. And it's all within a form or a structure of the butterfly system I I talk about, where the landscape has these three components, the painting has these three components, and the marriage of them in the middle, the body of the butterfly, is how you bring these two wings together. And I find with my students that they get lost in one of those components on either side. It confuses them. But if you keep going back to these three elements in the painting, these three elements in the landscape, and how do you bring them together, a clarity starts to happen in a bridge. So, which is the first time, Eric, and the only time I've presented that butterfly system outside of my studio. You got it on tape, Eric.
Well, thankfully, I think that the value of doing these things is that rather than rushing through them, is going through the full process. Like you said, we were like 10 hours but probably 20 hours of shooting and 10 hours of video edited. But the idea is preserving the legacy of what people have learned. You've spent your life learning these things and discovering things on your own, and the ability of sharing those so that it's not just the students that you've taught in workshops or students who have mentored under you, but other people who have a chance, no matter where they live in the world, can get that opportunity. I think that's pretty cool.
Yes. I thank you, and again, Eric, thank you for saying that. And again, Eric, I appreciate the platform you've created for that to happen, for not just me, for other artists to be able to spread that out into this world. Eric, ultimately, there's a 5-year-old out there, there's a 7-year-old that's going to see one of these videos and go, my God, this exists? This exists? I never knew this was possible. And that's going to spring in them into action,
we hear that all the time. We hear from people who exposed a kid or exposed a young person. We hear from them. We hear from people all over the world. I heard from a guy in Iran who said, we have nothing like this here. And he was able to buy it and watch it online, and it transformed him. So I think that's pretty cool when we can see that kind of thing happen. And we've got some big surprises that we're going to announce here pretty soon. I can't talk about it yet, but any day now, any day, and you're part of it. You know what I'm talking about, but you can't reveal it. So, Ken, thank you so much. You have one or two final thoughts for people about plein air painting?
Yes. One thought is always remember you're going for the joy of it. And from one vantage point, it's not the painting that matters, not the literal painting. It's being out there and being out there and being out there. That's the joy of it. For me, if you keep it focused there, you'll get some excellent paintings along the way that will rise up. That's one thought. Second thought is go out with others. Go make it a community. Get out there with people and paint together. So those are my two thoughts.
Great. Ken, thank you for being on the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you very much, Eric. I appreciate it.
Thank you again to Ken. I love his thoughtful and spiritual approach to painting, and I think it's refreshing to hear some different ways of approaching painting. And if you happen to see the video we did with him, you get to see him take my watch off without me even noticing, which was kind of embarrassing. Anyway, you ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions, and you, of course, can email me anytime, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Here's a question from Darlene Wilson, who asks, is it worth to have your artwork sit in a gallery for long periods of time? And what should you get in return for the 40 to 50% they get from your sales? I have seen my friends spend a lot of money shipping and hanging shows in galleries, even being asked to provide all the beverages and appetizers as well as their contact list, etc. Where is the line? Well, I got to tell you, Darlene, a natural thing for people to do is to assume that these people are getting 50% for doing nothing. And I suppose there are probably some galleries out there that are doing nothing, but most of them are doing something, and they're doing a lot. You have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Now, quite frankly, I know an artist who's given up 75% and he's just busting the doors open. He's selling so much. And he's happy to give up a large amount of money because he's making so much money on gallery sales. If things sit and they're not selling, maybe you want to have a discussion with the gallery. Why is that? Are they showing your work? Are they getting positive reaction to it? Is it something that you should refresh? Send them something new. Once in a while, I'll pull something out of the gallery and I'll repaint it or touch it up or change something in it because I have fresh eyes after it's been sitting a while, and then maybe send it off to another gallery. Galleries really have a hard time. Nobody really understands the plight of the galleries. First off, it's tougher than ever to make a living at a gallery. Sometimes I know galleries that are paying $25,000 and $50,000 a month rent in their locations. That means they got to sell a lot of paintings, $25,000 or $50,000 paintings, or half that, something like that for break even. Plus they've got lights, lights in galleries. The electric bills are massive because of all the lighting. And they have marketing and advertising, list building, working clients, the cost of events, salespeople, commissions, cocktail parties, advertising, you name it. They work hard for their money. Do not ignore that fact. And a lot of people I know make a lot of money from art galleries, and some of them don't. Some of them are in and some of them don't. But, you got to work with your galleries. It's a two-way street. They need your help and you need their help. And so I think that's worthwhile. Now, of course, you can survive without galleries, but then you got to take on marketing yourself. The idea of having a gallery is that they're selling for you when you sleep, and they're selling for you when you're painting, and your inventory could sit there a while. Everybody has hot and cold spells. Economies in different markets are good or bad, or sometimes things change. You might spend weeks or months or even longer periods of time. I've had, with my gallery, I've had hot and cold spells. They'll call me one time and it's like 3 times in a row in a month. They're like selling tons of paintings, and all of a sudden, they sit for a long time and I don't sell any for a while. It kind of depends. But they need to hear from you. They don't need to hear from you complaining or whining or beating them up. You just want to kind of let them know what's going on. They need to know your stories. They, send them an update of the shows that you're doing or the things that you're doing so they have something to talk about. Keep fresh in their mind. You got to remind them. A friend of mine sends chocolates to the gallery every time a salesperson sells something. He sends chocolates to reward that salesperson. Guess who he is going to promote next, or he or she is going to promote next, right? So if it sits in your studio unsold, what's the difference? If it's sitting in the gallery, it's being seen probably, unless it's in the back room. And by the way, I went into one of my galleries last summer and my painting was not out. It was sitting in the back room, and I asked why, and he said, it's not very good. I decided not to put it out. I said, I wish you'd told me. I'll take it back and fix it. But instead it just sat there, and he didn't tell me because he's got so much other stuff on his mind. Good idea to rotate things in and out if they're not selling. But anyway, sometimes a frame can make all the difference in the world too. But if you want to keep 100%, I get that. But doing that, you're taking on all the responsibility of marketing. And is that the best thing you can do? Now, I teach marketing. I have helped a lot of artists, but it's a lot of work. You need to spend 20% of your time minimum, and probably a little bit more if you want to really be successful. And a good gallery is worth their weight in gold. Seriously. Here's one from Bob in San Ramon. If you could only do one thing to sell your art, what would it be? Well, Bob, I don't think anyone should do one thing. You see, imagine the Parthenon, right? The building in Athens with the columns on. It's got that triangle on top and the columns. Imagine all the columns are gone except for one column in the middle, and it's holding that big heavy marble thing up. So now imagine a car slams into it, that column comes crashing down, the Parthenon comes crashing down. That's what we call a single point of failure. And a single point of failure is a flawed marketing strategy. If you want to succeed, you need massive action. That means you need lots of columns. You need all the columns all the way around the building. Do as many as you possibly can, multiple ways to reach people, to touch people. If I had to start out with one thing, it would be list building. Finding a list, creating a list of people who are truly interested in my paintings, and finding a way to stay in touch with them on a regular basis. Now, if you don't have any money, you can do it by email, or you can do maybe a little with direct mail. that stuff works extremely well. But don't live or die on a single point of failure. You need to do lots of things to market your work, which is why it's nice to have galleries working for you. Think of the time it saves you. The other thing is, our artists these days are so distracted. The thing that you've got to ask yourself is, what's the best and most effective use of your time? And the best and most effective use of your time as an artist is getting better as an artist and painting and doing as much painting. And all these people who are so busy doing other things that they're not getting time to paint. I had an artist tell me recently that she was not painting anymore because she was doing so many workshops. She never had time to paint. Another artist told me that he actually came to us and said, I want you to do my videos for me because I don't want to take customer service emails and calls and be running to the FedEx and UPS people all the time because I should be painting. And so, think about the things that are distracting you and actually what is the best use of your time? Well, the best use of your time is painting. The second best use of your time is figuring out how to make your business fly, which is communicating with your galleries, or if you don't have galleries, focusing on your marketing. Hope this helps. Anyway, that's our marketing minute for today. Hey, I hope to see you at the Figurative Art Convention in Williamsburg. Going to be cool. I think I'll get a triangled hat and maybe one of those red coats with gold buttons. I think that'd be kind of fun. Maybe I can get Peter Trippy, our editor, in one of those too. Maybe we'll go out on stage like that. We'd like to have fun at this thing. It's not stuffy, not boring. We laugh a lot. We play a lot of loud music. We dance around a little bit. Totally fun. It's kind of like the PleinAir Convention, which is also the same way. Totally fun. We just have fun. We're here, you learn better when you're having fun, and it's more fun to have fun, right? Anyway, the website's figurativeartconvention.com or pleinairconvention.com. Of course, you can Google them. And if you've not seen my Sunday blog about art, life, and all kinds of other stuff, it's really getting out there. Got a lot of people reading it now. I get a lot of feedback. Thank you so much for paying attention to it. I like doing it. It's called Sunday Coffee, and you can find it, coffeewitheric.com. You just subscribe for free. You just go on there and put your email in, then it comes to you automatically. It's always fun to do this. Let's do it again sometime. We'll do it like next week, shall we? I'll see you then, God willing. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it is a big world out there, and it does need you to paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.